Motorcycle engines roar outside Rick's garage. 6 biker gang members kick down the door, demanding protection money, leather jackets, chain weapons. They've come to claim this neighborhood for their drug operation. But old mechanic Rick doesn't reach for his wallet, he reaches for his torque wrench. What happens next will shock the criminal underworld. You're about to witness what happens when the wrong bikers terrorize the wrong garage. Rick Morrison stands behind his workbench, torque wrench in hand, watching armed criminals destroy his shop. 51 years old, 19 years at Morrison's Custom Motorcycles, the quietest mechanic on the block. The gang leader, a massive man called Crusher, points a sawed-off shotgun at Rick's chest. Protection money, old man. $5 grand a month or we burn this place down. Rick looks at the Harley-Davidson he's been restoring for 8 months, then back at the criminals threatening his life's work. Can't do that, he says quietly. 35 seconds. That's all it takes to turn predators into scrap metal. First biker never sees the torque wrench coming. Rick hurls the heavy steel tool with surgical precision, connecting with the man's temple like a guided missile. Down instantly, chain weapon clattering across the concrete floor. Rick moves through his own garage like mechanical death. Every tool, every motorcycle part, every piece of equipment mapped in his memory from 19 years of methodical organization. Second biker swings a tire iron at Rick's head. But Rick knows something the gang doesn't. He's been preparing for this moment since the day he opened his shop. Modified motorcycle chain, military grade. Rick whips it like a medieval flail, wrapping around the biker's weapon and yanking it from his hands. Then applies the chain for its intended purpose, restrained with extreme prejudice. Third and fourth bikers realize they're not fighting a mechanic anymore. They're facing someone who understands machines and violence in equal measure. Rick vanishes behind a lifted Kawasaki, using every piece of motorcycle equipment as tactical advantage. Pneumatic tools become weapons. Engine parts become projectiles. Even his hydraulic lift becomes an instrument of combat. Fifth biker tries to flank around the parts counter. Rick's waiting with a motorcycle battery, 12 volts, but applied to the right nerve clusters, enough to drop a grown man instantly. Sixth biker, panicking, fires his pistol wildly across the garage. Rick rolls under a vintage Indian motorcycle, emerges with equipment that doesn't belong in civilian garages, military demolition charges, combat engineering tools, devices designed for destroying enemy equipment and infrastructure, controlled explosion, precise placement. The garage door collapses exactly where Rick calculated, trapping the final biker beneath twisted metal. Gang leader Crusher finds himself alone, facing a man whose eyes hold the cold certainty of someone who's eliminated more dangerous enemies than street thugs. Please, man, we'll leave. We'll never come back. Rick considers this for exactly 1 second, then demonstrates why Army Rangers understand both mechanical systems and human anatomy. Combat knife, applied with surgical precision. The gang leader's shotgun becomes useless scrap metal as Rick shows him exactly what 19 years of hiding his skills has cost the criminal underworld. 6 biker gang members, 35 seconds. 0 survivors who can testify about what they found in Morrison's garage. Rick stands among the wreckage, breathing normally, like he just finished a routine motorcycle repair instead of conducting urban warfare. He walks to his office phone, dials 911, police. This is Rick Morrison at Morrison's Custom Motorcycles on 5th Street. Had some gang members try to extort protection money. Won't be a problem anymore. But this story didn't start 35 seconds ago. It started 24 years earlier. The day Staff Sergeant Richard Rick Morrison, 75th Ranger Regiment, finished his final deployment and bought a small motorcycle garage in Detroit. For 22 years, Rick had served as a combat engineer with the Army's most elite units. He'd cleared explosive devices from urban environments, destroyed enemy infrastructure, and eliminated threats to Ranger operations in conditions that killed specialists with less training. But Rick hadn't just cleared obstacles. When Ranger teams needed someone who could sabotage enemy equipment, create improvised weapons, or eliminate threats using civilian materials, Rick had volunteered for missions that officially never happened. He'd used automotive tools for combat engineering, employed mechanical knowledge for sabotage operations, created explosive devices from motorcycle parts when military ordnance wasn't available. 24 years ago, Rick had wanted peace, the satisfaction of building custom bikes instead of destroying enemy assets, honest work that created transportation instead of eliminating threats. Detroit's struggling neighborhoods offered exactly that opportunity: cheap rent, loyal customers, and the kind of community that minded its own business. For 19 years, Rick had been a perfect neighbor, skilled, reliable, never complained about the neighborhood's problems, built custom motorcycles with precision that impressed customers who never wondered why he was so good with mechanical systems. What they didn't know was that Rick had spent his first year studying every criminal pattern, every gang territory, every potential threat in the surrounding blocks. Old habits from a career where such knowledge meant mission survival. Rick had built himself a civilian identity as complete as any deep cover operation. Until tonight. Back to the present. Police sirens arriving at what looks like a demolition site. Gang task force officers trying to understand what happened. Garage owner next door, Tony Benedetto, emerges from his auto shop where he'd hidden during the attack. "Rick," he says, staring at the destroyed biker gang, "what the hell did you do?" Rick secures his tools, each movement precise and controlled. "Protected my business from criminals who wanted to rob me." This wasn't protection, this was military-level urban warfare. For 19 years, Rick has avoided this conversation. For 19 years, he successfully separated his Army Ranger past from his civilian mechanic present. But there's no separating them now. "Army Rangers," he says simply. 75th Regiment, Combat Engineering, 22 years. The words hit the garage like artillery shells. Tony stares at him. "You're telling me that for 19 years, this neighborhood has had an Army Ranger building motorcycles?" "Former Army Ranger," Rick corrects. "I'm a mechanic now. I build bikes, not destroy things." "But what you did tonight." Rick looks at his garage where he spent 19 years learning to create instead of destroy, to build machines instead of eliminate threats. Tonight forced him to remember that sometimes the best way to protect what you've built is to destroy what threatens it. Some skills never leave you, even when you want them to. Detective Maria Santos arrives to investigate what appears to be the most unusual gang incident in the precinct's history. The 6 gang members are identified as part of a criminal organization that had been systematically extorting local businesses to fund their drug operations. They'd researched Morrison's garage, identified it as an easy target, isolated location, elderly owner, valuable equipment to steal or destroy. They had no idea they'd selected the business of someone who'd spent 22 years perfecting the art of urban combat engineering. "Mr. Morrison," Detective Santos says, "your response was unlike anything we've seen. Where did you learn to use motorcycle equipment for tactical purposes?" Rick inspects a damaged Harley, checking for parts that can be salvaged. "In Rangers, you learn that every tool has multiple applications. Mechanical equipment can build motorcycles or eliminate threats. The difference is in how you choose to use the knowledge." Young mechanic Jake approaches hesitantly. He'd been Rick's apprentice for 6 months, never suspecting his mentor's background. "Rick, how did you know exactly what to do? How did you turn the whole garage into a weapon?" Rick looks at the young mechanic who reminds him of himself decades ago, passionate about machines, unprepared for the reality that sometimes builders must fight to protect their work. "In my previous job, I learned that protecting what you build sometimes requires eliminating what threatens it. The skills aren't different, the purpose is." 3 weeks later, Rick makes a decision that changes his retirement. He begins working with local law enforcement, teaching them how mechanical knowledge can be used for urban counterterrorism. The work allows him to use his Ranger expertise without returning to active military service. He keeps his garage, but he no longer feels the need to completely separate his Army experience from his civilian mechanical work. Word spreads through the motorcycle community. Morrison's Custom Motorcycles becomes known as the safest shop in 3 states, not just because of security systems, but because everyone knows what happened to the last gang that threatened it. The criminal organizations that had been terrorizing local businesses receive a clear message: stay away from Morrison's garage. The old mechanic who eliminated 6 gang members isn't just a mechanic. Rick never advertises his military background, never seeks recognition for his specialized knowledge, but he no longer pretends that 19 years of building motorcycles erased 22 years of combat engineering, because tonight proved that the 2 skill sets aren't opposites, they're complementary. The precision that builds engines can also plan perfect ambushes. The knowledge that creates machines can also eliminate threats to those machines. The ghost mechanic of Morrison's garage revealed himself to be something far more substantial than anyone imagined. A guardian who'd been hiding in plain sight, protecting his corner of Detroit one custom bike at a time. Local news covers the story. Mechanic stops gang extortion. But Rick declines all interviews. He's not interested in fame. He's interested in the next custom build, the next restoration project, the next opportunity to serve his community through honest work and, when necessary, through skills that kept America safe in places whose names he'll never discuss. Because that's who Rick Morrison chose to become. Not a warrior, not a killer, just a mechanic who happens to possess knowledge that saved his business when criminals came calling. The neighborhood sleeps better knowing Rick's watching over their streets. Small business owners work more confidently knowing someone understands both creation and protection. So I ask you, have you ever encountered someone whose mechanical expertise seemed to extend beyond their job requirements? Someone whose competence suggested training they couldn't discuss? Share their story in the comments, because sometimes the most powerful protection comes from those who've chosen creation but never forgotten how to wage precise destruction. Thank you for watching. If this moved you, subscribe and help us honor the quiet guardians who protect our communities. These are the people who remind us that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear coveralls and smell like motor oil, until the moment their neighborhood needs them to be something more. And remember, the next time you see a mechanic whose work seems too precise, whose knowledge seems too complete, whose calm under pressure seems unnatural, you might be trusting your bike to someone whose training included lessons about more than just engines, but who chose to use that training to keep machines running and communities safe, one custom build at a time.